welcome to another episode of the Innovating Together podcast, which is sponsored by the Carnegie Corporation of New York. And also episodes of our shows are sponsored by Mainstay, which is a student engagement platform that we know is actually proven to work because they engage in RCTs and have external reviews and evaluations of their products. So take a look at mainstay.com to actually see some of those incredible results that we often share about. Today, however, I'm going to be sharing with you a conversation between myself and Ben Nelson, who is the co-founder is the founder and CEO. I think he at one time went by chancellor of Minerva. Minerva Project was something that they were once called, but it goes beyond Minerva's. It's like a company, but also it's a college. And I'll let the conversation speak for itself. I would say that Minerva is a really interesting experience where students are engaging in it's like a virtual Socratic method experience that I have not been able to see any other college or university replicate. And they do it while students are actually living in different countries around the world. They move around. So students are getting an immersive experience in other cultures, but they're also getting a deep deep educational experience. And that is a terrible pitch for Minerva, but I promise you it's one of those things where like you have to experience it to understand it. And it is very small. It's not fully scaled or anything like that, but I do think it's a really interesting, they sit in an interesting space. And so this conversation I want to introduce to you is between myself and Ben, who is an old friend. And it's at the AIR Show, which ASU+GSV put on this year, which is the AI Revolution show. And so there were a range of conversations that were solely focused on AI and education. And the reason why this is so timely is the conversation that we had is around, it was called Uncharted Learning, AI, Adaptability, and Success. And what we were trying to do is talk about what are the skills that are most adaptable? What is the kind of learning that is most adaptable for students that you should teach that will help transcend no matter what happens in the future of AI? So I think it's a complex topic. I think that Ben's a really smart guy. I think Minerva is doing really interesting work. And I thought it was a really great conversation. So I hope that you will enjoy this discussion between myself and Ben Nelson from just a few weeks ago at the ASU+GSV AIR Show. Hi there, welcome. We're going to have a lively conversation between myself and the founder of a movement around rethinking how education happens. Ben, first, why the heck should people be listening to you about this subject? I want to ground for folks who are outside in the educational space. What is it that you do differently in terms of your interpretation of education? You started a university, reimagined online learning. Give a little bit, a snippet of exactly how you approach it.
Well, the very short snippet is that usually when people think about education, they think of it as either being binary, you know something, you don't know something, or being linear. I know it kind of well, I know it okay, I know it really well. The problem is that's not actually learning. Learning is knowing how to use what it is that you've learned. And depth of understanding, it rarely translates to the ability to apply. And so if you actually rethink what education should be like, rather than it being binary, rather than it being linear, if you actually say, hey, I'm going to create an educational infrastructure that enables the learner to understand how broadly they can apply what it is that they've learned, track it, measure it, incentivize it. You then graduate a different kind of learner, somebody who can actually do things as opposed to just know a few things.
So this is a perfect segue into our topic today, which is about, this whole experience at the AIR Show is about how AI is going to be impacting education. And so we're learning about how to use AI in the classroom, how to adapt, all of that. But what we're talking about today is how do you anticipate the skills how do you teach students skills that are durable, that will transcend whatever weird things AI causes?
Right.
Because we actually can't anticipate the market impact of AI. People are spending a lot of energy trying to anticipate, and bless their hearts. I think there's a lot of good ideas folks are pursuing. We have actually no idea what is going to happen. And so if I'm making decisions about how I educate my students today, I want to talk about the way that you approach building out your curriculum so that you are not just reacting,
Right.
but you're actually focusing on the skills that might have translated over time in the past and you think are actually going to be enduring.
Right. And see, that's I think one of the great fallacies that a lot of institutions and consultants and others fall prey to, right? You'll hear oftentimes this phrase called the 21st century skills, right? Oh, what are 21st century skills? And people say, oh, you're thinking critically and empathy and multiculturalism. Why were those things not relevant in the 1990s? Why were they not relevant in the 1490s, right? So the reality is that if a learner is able to deploy systematic thinking, if they're able to look at a claim and be able to distinguish between a claim and a fact, right? Being able to understand the level of veracity or likely veracity of that claim. If they're able to look at a decision trade-off and say, should I take path 1 or path 2, right? If they're able to understand who it is that they're communicating with and then modify what they say so that the audience will actually understand what it is they're trying to explain. These are not things that go out of style. They're not things that just got into style. These are the things that any rational person agrees are crucial for individuals to know how to do. Institutions agree with that. The institutions say, oh, we teach critical thinking, creative problem solving, effective communications. We teach you to be a global citizen, but it's not in the curriculum. They don't actually do it.
Well, how do you microdose it, though? How do you embed it in? Because I feel like we get this consistent pressure from students that the reason why they come to college, if we're talking about higher education, the reason why they come to college over more than 90% is to get a job.
Right.
And the job market is changing regularly, and so they're looking for things that can be useful immediately upon graduation today or 4 years from now. And so, I mean, there's a tension there where faculty and administrators really have to make sure that what they're offering feels, sounds, smells, is relevant right now, but you're saying, great, there's this other approach. So is it that you're sharing an epistemology or like a lens by which the learning should come through and that any topic can be embedded through that lens?
Exactly. But you've got to be explicit about it. See, the mistake that universities and learning institutions in general trip up over is they say, oh, okay, I'm going to teach you this thing and you're going to get that other thing which is really important by accident. You don't get the other thing by accident. You've got to be explicit about it. And it's important for in educational institutions and employers to be very clear, to say, wait, if you don't know how to communicate with somebody, then you've got a problem. I was just having a conversation earlier today with somebody who works at a nuclear fusion organization. And we were talking about durable skills versus narrow understanding. And he says, well, there are only a few plasma physicists in the world that can understand nuclear fusion, and we need those people. I said, absolutely. And then he said, unprompted, but what would be really great is if they actually knew how to talk to other human beings, right? Because that's the difference between having that expert be able to be effective at the workplace as opposed to just come up with a great idea and then piss everybody off, people quit, and then the project fails.
So so we've been hanging out like the 100,000 foot level, yeah. But it needs to get practical, right? Like I need nuts and bolts. Like explain it to me like a simple way. So if we're picking communication skills, we know that those are relevant to the workforce today. They also are durable skills, right? So let's pick a class or a topic that you would be thinking about teaching, yep. And exactly how you would do what you're talking about of focusing on the durable skill, yep. Rather than being distracted by the short-term deliverable. So right. Like just pick whatever.
Yeah. So communication is a great example because the ability to communicate effectively is a catch-all, right? It's a big capacity that has underneath it a whole bunch of small capacities. One we talked about, knowing who your audience is and then be able to modify what it is depending on who the audience is. So that's one example of a communication skill. Another communication skill is using word choice, right? Or phrasing, or understanding emotional biases, right? In order to be able to communicate around them. So these are all components of effective communications. So the first thing you need to do is define the component parts. You can't just say, you're a good communicator, you're a bad communicator. Because sometimes the components of communication, some of them are done well and others are done poorly. And if you don't give the learner feedback on, you really didn't engage with your audience, but boy, your example was particularly evocative, right? You made a wonderful analogy, right? You need that level of granular feedback in order to be able to get somebody to learn. So one is you figure out the taxonomy. You figure out is what are the skills that you want to make sure that the learner learns. Then you have to introduce them, right? So then you actually have to name them, tag them, and say, you're going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And we do that in an individual course that is dedicated to introducing and practicing those skills. But then the third part, which is the most crucial, which is in all of your other classes, for all the other professors, they now need to be aware that you're training learners to be able to be adept at this. And they have to give the learner the opportunity for spaced, deliberate practice across all of the different contexts of the other classes that they're taking to get the kind of granular feedback about the component parts. You do that, you get a great communicator.
So I feel like the instructional designers around here are going to be like, yeah, totally. Like, this is what we do, right? And so you're just talking about an emphasis on skill rather than being just focused on the topic. But there's some stuff that, now listen, I know that Minerva is different. Like, I think if you had a calling card, it would be weird. That's your thing. We're weird.
Wise.
So for those of you who don't know, Minerva, students, the university that you built, basically you've created a incredible Socratic method virtual experience that is keeps students on the edge of their seat. I've gone through it a couple times. There's nothing else that exists, I think, like it. It's a fundamentally different philosophy of teaching and experiencing education, and you happen to do it online. And then you happen to have students live in different places around the world. So they're getting exposure to different perspectives and cultures while they're having this really deep Socratic method experience. Not everyone can do that, though. You're now making it so that you can go to other universities and you can actually help them learn how to do that, right? But at the end of the day, we still run into some of the structural barriers that I think folks in this room might be thinking about, like, yeah, dude, I got to get accredited. Yeah. My state board is asking for boobity bop. And I have to deliver X number of people who are credentialed in X because those are the numbers that I'm being told. So you're suggesting that they can somehow ignore some of those existing policy pressures and focus on these durable skills that will transcend AI.
Right. Actually, here's the funniest part. We've now worked with accreditation authorities in 12 countries. And it turns out that what the accreditors are asking for is exactly what we do, right? So the university that we built, Minerva University, is in WASC, the region here in California, Hawaii, Guam. And for a number of years, and I don't know if WASC still does this, for a number of years, when new institutions were applying to get accreditation at WASC, what they were showing them were our documents as the prototype into what you should be doing. Why? Because every accreditor anywhere around the world wants an institution to name, track, measure, and report learning objectives, right? And every accreditor acknowledges that learning objectives include metacognitive capacities, critical thinking, creative problem solving. No accreditor says don't teach your students how to think critically. They all want that to happen. And so the problem is that institutions, despite how much they complain about the constraints of the accreditors, don't actually deliver on those reports because they don't know how and they don't have the mechanisms. And so when we work with universities, we actually not only create programs that do these things, but because they use our infrastructure, even when they don't teach remotely, even when they teach in a physical classroom, they still use our technology forum to be able to work through lesson plans, to have the students create accessible data, to give them learning outcome overviews over time. all of that generates the most pristine accreditor reports that you've seen.
So I'm sure everybody in this room is like, yeah, this would be so nice, and then we immediately jump to all the obstacles in our way. So I have no idea if you're doing this, so I'm just going to give you some real-time career coaching. I think that your higher calling is that you should create the professional development curriculum that teaches teachers how to teach, and you should, at scale, make it easier for this version of how you teach to be, that should be the form by which we educate and do professional development and like instructional design coaching for faculty. Like Centers for Teaching and Learning, like at scale on steroids is what you need to create, because then how you teach the teacher, they will then replicate, right? So
Right.
Why won't you do that? Why are you failing me?
It's a great idea. The challenge in any direct-to-learner enterprise, like what you described, is you have to find the learner, right? When we built our own university, we did it not as a business. Minerva University is a nonprofit, right? And we set it up as an independent nonprofit because we are not in the business of finding a learner and providing them direct education, because it's just a very difficult and long business. Now, of course, we did that just to demonstrate what is possible, so we don't shy away from some difficulties. But we believe that the much bigger scale impact is to work with institutions that already talk to those learners. So what we should be doing, and this is the lesson that I'm going to take away from your suggestion, which is a great one, is to find those institutions that are training instructional designers today and then reform their curriculum.
Yeah, or just think about national associations, think about the different collective entities that faculty engage in, and you could start using your, I don't know, you would call it your pedagogy, your, the way that you kind of teach people about the world. Use your method and be able to do it at scale, because then we can actually get to the kind of numbers that are going to affect the number of learners that we need to, given the complexity of the moment.
Well, and we are now working institution by institution in doing this. So we now work with...
I know, but I'm telling you, you're not going fast enough.
I know. I need to go faster. I know. We now work with about 16 universities in 8 different countries. And what we are starting to see, though, are when we start working with multiple institutions in a given geography, there is an acceleration in the number of schools that come on board, the number of universities that come on board. So we are beginning to see those tipping points happen.
Okay, so I appreciate you being on the hot seat. Well, I only had 20 minutes, so I get a chance to grill you. So I want to go to AI, and specifically the 3 things that you think are going to be most dramatically affected in the education space from your vantage point, because you're on this cutting edge.
Well, I love the setup where you said, well, we can't possibly predict the future, and now you're asking me to predict the future. So I will, of course, give you the bushel full of salt that it is very hard to predict the future. However, I do think that there are various forks in the road with AI. And so maybe I'll give you 3 forks in the road of potential things that could happen. So one fork in the road is, in some ways, this pseudo-utopian view, right? Which is productivity increases dramatically. Menial tasks are done by the AI. In fact, even higher order tasks are done by the AI. Prosperity, therefore, is unlocked. You get much easier production costs. And we go higher and higher up the value chain as greater creative ideas get rewarded economically. Now, that's nice in theory, but what that means is that the human needs to stay at least 1, if not 2 or 3 steps ahead of the AI. So far, the AI seems to be having a lot of us beat very, very quickly. And so I find that is an unlikely scenario unless we have fundamental systematic reform of education to be able to do that. The second scenario is, in some ways, what happened, I think, with search and social media when artificial intelligence turbocharged it, which is that we effectively commodified information, access to information, and our standards degraded. So one can see sector after sector of people bemoaning that our quality standards have become more degraded, that we don't pursue excellence as much, editorial content is lower, etc. What happens in AI could be that if creation of content, we flood the zone with above average stuff, good enough. And then the third is that the general artificial intelligence comes on board faster than we expect. Right now, we're stuck in an LLM model, which gives us some hope. An AGI comes around, and that's much more dystopian, because the AGI will be able to do everything we can do,
AGI.
and much more. The artificial general intelligence.
So I don't think you gave me like a super optimistic view, but not like a terribly bummer view. My favorite question is how the most, as we land the plane. So we've talked about how we can focus on, with this uncharted path ahead, building durable skills and teaching students scale. I've given you some career coaching about where you should take your life. But I want to end with your most best use of either ChatGPT or AI personally. In your life, what is a use of AI that has made your life significantly better thus far?
I will tell you my favorite use. It has personal impact, which is my father, who's in his mid-80s and is a scientist, still on the bench. English is not his native tongue, and for his entire life he has struggled with writing research grants and papers. And a year ago, he discovered ChatGPT, and therefore he kept sending me drafts over the years, which I could not understand, not because of his English, but because of the science, and I couldn't help him out. And he no longer has to send me those drafts. So ChatGPT has saved me constant disappointment for my father, which has been amazing.
I love it. Mine is difficult HR, personal management emails you have to do that you're very fretting about. Put it in ChatGPT and ask it to take the emotion out. Oh my God, saves you so much time. Emotional, lighten. Oh, it's wonderful.
I love it.
So thank you so much, Ben. I feel like we've learned a lot, and I hope this has been valuable to you all, and we have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.